The galaxy had been burning for 312 years. Admiral Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another battle unfold through the viewport. Explosions lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. Ships the size of cities traded fire with weapons that could melt planets. His enemy was out there somewhere among those flashing lights. Commander Thexel of the HFY Dominion had been fighting this same war for longer than most species lived. They had faced each other in dozens of battles, and neither had ever truly won. The Zephyrian Empire controlled the northern sectors of the galaxy. Their ships were white and silver, sleek like knives cutting through space. They believed in order, in rules, in the natural right of the strong to lead the weak. For centuries, they had been the galaxy's police force. The HFY Dominion ruled the southern regions. Their vessels were dark as midnight, bristling with weapons like metal thorns. They valued freedom above all else, the right of every species to choose its own path without interference. They saw the Zephyrians as tyrants who needed to be stopped. Both sides thought they were right. Both sides had good reasons to fight. That was what made the war so terrible. "Status report," Veltar said to his officers. His voice was tired. He had given this same order 10,000 times before. 12 of our ships destroyed, sir. Enemy losses estimated at 14 vessels. The young officer's voice shook slightly. He was new to war. He would learn, or he would die. There was no middle ground anymore. Veltar nodded. Another day, another. Small victory that felt like defeat. They had started this battle with 50 ships. The HFY had brought 48. Now both fleets would limp home to rebuild, to gather more ships, to send more young people to die in the endless war. Far across the battlefield, Commander Thexel received his own report. 14 ships lost, Commander. Zephyrian casualties. Appear to be 12 vessels. Thexel closed his eyes. Somewhere on those 14 ships had been his nephew, fresh from the academy and eager to prove himself. The boy had wanted to be a hero. Now he was space dust and radiation. "Send the retreat signal," Thexel ordered. "We've bled enough for one day." This was how every battle ended. Both sides would claim victory because they had killed slightly more of the enemy. Both sides would mourn their dead and prepare for the next fight. The war continued because neither could afford to stop fighting. Entire star systems had become graveyards. Worlds that once held billions of people were now empty rocks orbiting dead suns. The war had consumed everything in its path like a hungry beast that could never be satisfied. Light years away from the battle, Captain Kim Tae-ho sat in his small office aboard the Earth Defense Force station. He was reading reports from the EO frontier, trying to understand a war that seemed to make no sense. Humanity was new to space. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago. While the Zephyrians and HFY had been fighting their ancient war, humans had been learning to walk among the stars like children taking their first steps. The galactic community barely noticed Earth. When human diplomats tried to make contact with the warring empires, they were treated like insects buzzing around giants. The aliens saw humans as primitive creatures playing with technology they did not understand. "Captain," said Lieutenant Park So-jin, entering his office with a data pad, "we've received another intelligence report from the monitoring stations." Tae-ho took the pad and read through the numbers. Ship movements, battle results, casualty estimates. The war was getting worse. Each battle was larger than the last, each weapon more destructive. "What do our analysts think will happen next?" he asked. Park So-jin looked uncomfortable. "They believe the war will continue for at least another century, sir. Maybe longer. Both sides are too evenly matched to achieve decisive victory." Tae-ho set down the pad and walked to his window. Outside, he could see Earth's blue marble hanging. In space, his home looked so peaceful, so small compared to the vast galaxy burning around it. "A century," he repeated quietly. "How many will die in a century of this war?" "Trillions, sir. Maybe more." The captain was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, just starting school. He thought about all the children who would grow up in a galaxy consumed by endless war. They deserved better than this. "Keep monitoring the situation," he said finally, "and increase patrols along our borders. If this war spreads, we need to be ready." But deep in his heart, Tae-ho wondered if being ready would be enough. The Zephyrians and Kethavar had weapons that could crack planets. They had been perfecting the art of war for centuries. What could humanity possibly do against forces like that? He did not know that soon. He would have to find an answer to that question. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 3 centuries was about to reach a breaking point, and humanity would be forced to choose between hiding in their corner of space or stepping forward into the fire. The decision would change everything. The message came through hyperspace channels at the speed of light, crackling with urgency. Lieutenant Lee Min-ho sat at his monitoring station on the edge of human space, watching his screens fill with energy readings that made his blood run cold. "This can't be right," he whispered, checking his instruments again. The numbers didn't change. 2 massive fleets were converging on the same point in space, and their destination made his stomach drop. Zerion Prime, home to 12 billion innocent people. Lee Min-ho activated the emergency beacon that would reach Captain Kim Tae-ho within minutes. The young lieutenant had been monitoring the war for 2 years, watching distant battles through sensors and radio waves. He had never seen readings like this. In the Zerion system, Admiral Veltar's flagship emerged from hyperspace like a white whale breaching dark water. The Eternal Dawn was 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could level mountains. Behind it came the entire Zephyrian battle fleet, their silver hulls gleaming in the light of Zerion's sun. Veltar stood on his bridge, staring at the blue and green world spinning peacefully below. Zerion Prime had managed to stay neutral throughout the war. The planet housed refugees from dozens of species, people who had lost their homes to the endless fighting. Children played in its cities while their parents worked to rebuild lives shattered by war. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "Kethavar ships are approaching from the opposite vector. Flagship identified as the Void's Embrace." Veltar's jaw tightened. Thexel was here, his oldest enemy, the one commander who had matched him battle for battle across 3 centuries of war. Today, one of them would finally win. Today, the war would end. On the other side of the planet, the Void's Embrace dropped out of hyperspace like a shadow falling across the stars. Commander Thexel's ship was darker than space itself, its hull covered in sensor-absorbing material that made it look like a hole in reality. The Kethavar fleet spread out behind it like black wings. Thexel studied the tactical display showing Veltar's position. They had fought so many times that each knew the other's strategies by heart. But this time was different. This time, they both carried weapons that could end everything. "Commander," his weapons officer said quietly, "the planet killer is charged and ready." Thexel nodded slowly. The planet killer was the Kethavar's most terrible weapon, a device that could turn a world's core into a bomb. They had built it in desperation, knowing that the war was slowly destroying both civilizations. Sometimes to save the galaxy, you had to be willing to break it first. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship," Thexel ordered. Veltar's face appeared on the main screen, his expression hard as stone. "Thexel, I wondered when you would finally show yourself." "The same could be said of you, old friend." Thexel's voice carried centuries of weariness. "How many times have we danced this dance?" "Too many," Veltar admitted. "But today it ends. Surrender now, and I will allow your people to leave with honor." Thexel almost smiled. "You know I cannot do that, just as you cannot surrender to me. We are what this war has made us." Both commanders understood what was about to happen. Their planet-killer weapons were charged and ready. Fired simultaneously, the devices would not only destroy both flagships, but crack Zerion Prime like an egg. 12 billion lives would end in nuclear fire. Yet neither could back down. 3 centuries of war had led to this moment. Every battle, every death, every sacrifice had brought them here. To yield now would make all of it meaningless. On his monitoring station, Lieutenant Lee Min-ho watched the energy readings spike. "Captain," he called over the emergency channel, "both fleets are powering up planet killers. They're going to destroy Zerion Prime." Captain Kim Tae-ho sat in his ready room, reading the intelligence report that had just arrived. The numbers told a story of mutual destruction on a scale that would shock the galaxy. When the dust settled, there would be nothing left but an asteroid field where a living world once spun. "Sir," Lieutenant Park So-jin's voice came over the intercom, "we're receiving the emergency transmission from Lieutenant Lee Min-ho." Tae-ho activated his screen and saw the young officer's frightened face. "Captain, you need to see this. The energy signatures are off the charts. If those weapons fire, the explosion will destabilize the entire sector." The captain studied the tactical display. Zerion Prime was 600 light-years from Earth, but the gravitational effects of its destruction would ripple outward like waves in a pond. Within decades, those waves would reach human space. "How long do we have?" Tae-ho asked. "Unknown, sir. Both fleets are holding position, but that could change at any moment. The planet killers are already charged." Tae-ho made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. "Signal all ships in the sector. Emergency jump to Zerion Prime." "Sir," Park So-jin protested, "we only have 5 ships against 2 entire battle fleets, sir." "Sometimes," Tae-ho said, standing up and heading for the bridge, "the smallest voice can stop the loudest argument. And sometimes someone has to be willing to stand between giants before they destroy everything." The race to Zerion Prime had begun. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like 5 small birds flying into a storm. Captain Kim Tae-ho's ship, the Soul's Hope, was barely 1/10 the size of the massive alien dreadnoughts that faced each other across Zerion Prime. His other 4 vessels were even smaller, patrol ships and scouts that had never been designed. "For war, Captain," whispered Ensign Choi Da-un from her station. "The energy readings from those ships, our shields wouldn't last 10 seconds against their main guns." Tae-ho studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian flagship Eternal Dawn hung in space like a silver cathedral, its weapons pointed at the dark mass of the Kethvar ship, Void's Embrace. Between them spun the beautiful blue world of Zerion Prime, home to billions of innocent people, who had no idea they were about to die. "Signal both fleets," Tae-ho ordered. "All frequencies." The response came immediately from Admiral Veltar. "Unknown vessels, you are in a combat zone. Identify yourselves and withdraw immediately, or be destroyed as collateral damage." Commander Thexel's voice followed. "These are human ships. What are these insects doing here? Their technology is barely advanced enough for interstellar travel." Tae-ho ignored the insults and positioned his small fleet directly between the 2 massive battle groups. His crew stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Lieutenant Park So-jin gripped her console so hard her knuckles turned white. "Captain Kim Tae-ho of the Earth Defense Force," he announced over all channels. "I have something both of you need to hear." Admiral Veltar's laugh was cold as space. "Human, your species has been in space for barely 30 years. What could you possibly know about warfare that we do not?" Instead of answering with words, Tae-ho nodded to Lieutenant Oh Hyun-woo at the communications station. "Begin transmission." What happened next stunned both alien fleets into silence. Detailed tactical analyses began flooding every screen and communication device on both sides. Precise locations of shield generators, weapon charging stations, engine vulnerabilities and structural weak points appeared with mathematical accuracy. On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Veltar watched in growing amazement as his tactical officer confirmed the data. "Sir, these coordinates are perfect. They've identified weaknesses in our hull that even our own engineers don't know about." Across the void, Commander Thexel stared at similar information appearing on his screens. "How is this possible? These readings show they've been studying our ship designs for decades." "Because we have been," Tae-ho replied calmly. "For 30 years, humanity has been watching your war. We've analyzed every battle, studied every ship design, recorded every tactical decision. Not because we planned to fight you, but because we needed to understand what was happening in our galaxy." Lieutenant Lee Min-ho's voice joined the transmission from his monitoring station. "We've watched you destroy each other for 3 centuries. We've seen entire civilizations reduced to ash and radiation. We know your weapons, your strategies, your strengths and weaknesses better than you know them yourselves." Admiral Veltar's voice carried a note of respect for the first time. "The accuracy of this data is impressive, but why share it with both sides? What do you gain from helping your enemies destroy each other more efficiently?" "That's just it," Captain Oh Hyun-woo said, speaking from the communications station. "We're not here to help you destroy each other. We're here to show you that you can." The alien commanders fell silent, trying to understand what the humans meant. Tae-ho continued, "Look at your tactical displays, both of you. Those coordinates I just transmitted. They're not targeting systems designed to destroy your ships. They're precision points that would disable your planet-killer weapons without damaging your vessels or killing your crews." Commander Thexel was the first to understand. "You're showing us how to fight without annihilating each other." "More than that," Tae-ho replied. "I'm showing you something you've both forgotten after 3 centuries of war. You're showing you that there's a choice between total victory and total defeat." Ensign Choi Da-un monitored the alien communications channels as confused voices spoke back and forth between the two fleets. Crew members on both sides were analyzing the human data, confirming its accuracy, trying to understand why these newcomers would reveal such valuable intelligence. "But why?" Admiral Veltar asked. "Your species could have used this information to your advantage. You could have sold it to the highest bidder or used it to ensure your own safety." "Because," Tae-ho said quietly, "we looked at what your war has cost the galaxy, and we decided that no one should have to pay that price. Not your people, not the Kethva, and certainly not the billions of innocents caught in between." Lieutenant Park So-jin reported softly, "Captain, both fleets are powering down their planet-killer weapons." "This is impossible," Thexel muttered. Over the channel, "No species gives away military advantage for nothing. What do you really want, humans?" Tae-ho's answer was simple. "We want you to stop killing each other long enough to save the people on that planet below us. After that, maybe we can talk about ending this war before it destroys the entire galaxy." For the first time in 300 years, the two most powerful fleets in the galaxy hesitated, their weapons cooling, their commanders forced to consider that perhaps there was another way. The silence that followed Captain Kim Tae-ho's words stretched across space like a held breath. On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Veltar stared at the tactical display showing the precise coordinates where his planet-killer weapon could be disabled rather than fired. 300 years of warfare had not prepared him for this moment. "You want us to work together," he said finally, his voice carrying disbelief. "Zephyrians and Kethva fighting side by side." "Not fighting," Tae-ho corrected gently. "Saving. There are 12 billion people on Zerion Prime who are about to die because 2 fleets are pointing weapons at each other. Your ships working together could evacuate that entire planet in 6 hours. Commander Thexel's harsh laugh crackled over the communications. "Human, you understand nothing. We have been enemies for longer than your civilization has existed. The Zephyrians are tyrants who crush freedom wherever they find it. And the Kethva are chaos bringers who destroy order and stability," Admiral Veltar shot back. "We cannot simply forget centuries of bloodshed." Lieutenant Park So-jin watched her captain's face as he listened to the alien commanders argue. She had served with Tae-ho for 5 years and had never seen him look so tired. The weight of 12 billion lives seemed to press down on his shoulders. "Captain," she whispered, "maybe this was a mistake. They hate each other too much." But Tae-ho was not giving up. "Admiral Veltar, Commander Thexel, may I ask you both a question?" "Speak," Veltar said. "What exactly are you fighting for anymore?" The question hung in space between the 3 fleets. On Zerion Prime below, the planet's population had detected the massive energy signatures above them. Panic was spreading through the cities as people realized that death hung over their world like a sword. Lieutenant Lee Min-ho's voice joined the conversation from his monitoring station. "I've been watching your war for 2 years. I've read every battle report, analyzed every casualty list. Do you know what I found?" "Enlighten us," Thexel said coldly. "In the last 50 years, you've fought 417 major battles. The Zephyrians won 212. The Kethva won 205. You're almost perfectly matched. Neither side can win." Admiral Veltar's tactical officer leaned close to whisper in his ear. The Admiral's face grew pale as he heard the numbers. "Confirmed, sir. Our own analysis shows similar results. We've been fighting a stalemate for decades. But we continue to fight," Thexel said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Because surrender is impossible. Too much blood has been spilled." Captain Oh Hyunwoo spoke up from his position at the communications station. "Commanders, I want to show you something." Can you access the medical databases from your last 10 battles? Both alien fleets transmitted their casualty reports. The numbers appeared on screens throughout all three fleets. Hundreds of thousands of dead and wounded. Entire ship crews vaporized. In seconds, young officers who would never return home to their families. Now look at this, Oh Hyunwoo continued. He transmitted the population data for Zerion Prime. 12 billion civilians. More people than both your fleets have killed in the last 10 years of fighting. And they're all going to die in the next hour if you pull those triggers. Ensign Choi Da-eun monitored the internal communications on both alien ships. She could hear crew members talking in hushed voices, questioning orders that had seemed absolute just minutes before. "This is madness," Admiral Veltar said, but his voice was quieter now. "Even if we could work together to evacuate the planet, what then? The war continues. Nothing changes." "Everything changes," Tae-ho replied. "Because for the first time in 3 centuries, you would have chosen to save lives instead of taking them. Your people would see Zephyrians and Kethvar working together instead of dying together." Commander Thexel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weariness that seemed to come from his very soul. "Human, you ask us to do the impossible. My people have been taught to hate the Zephyrians since birth. Their people have been taught the same about us." "Then teach them something different," Lieutenant Park Seo-jin said, speaking for the first time during the negotiations. "Show them that enemies can become allies when innocent lives are at stake." On Zerion Prime, the first evacuation ships were already launching from the surface. Civilian transports packed with refugees who had nowhere else to go. They moved slowly, their old engines struggling against gravity. At their current rate, less than 1 million people would escape before the planet killers fired. "Admiral," Veltar's tactical officer reported, "our transport capacity is sufficient to evacuate 3 billion people in 6 hours. Our ships could handle 4 billion in the same time," Thexel's logistics officer added. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Together, the 2 fleets could save every life on Zerion Prime. Separately, they could only save their own pride while 12 billion people burned. "One evacuation," Admiral Veltar said slowly. "A temporary ceasefire to save civilians, nothing more." "Agreed," Commander Thexel replied. "But after this, we return to our war." Captain Kim Tae-ho smiled for the first time since arriving at Zerion Prime. "One evacuation," he agreed. "Let's start with that." The impossible had become possible. Ancient enemies would work together if only for a few hours. It was a beginning. The evacuation began with small steps and careful words. Admiral Veltar's transport ships approached from the north, while Commander Thexel's vessels came from the south. For the first time in 3 centuries, Zephyrian and Kethvar ships shared the same airspace without firing their weapons. Captain Kim Tae-ho watched from his bridge as the impossible unfolded before his eyes. "Lieutenant Park Seo-jin, coordinate the landing zones. Make sure both fleets don't accidentally target each other while they're focused on the planet." "Yes, sir," Park Seo-jin replied, her fingers dancing across her console. She was translating between 2 completely different military protocols, turning centuries of war language into words of cooperation. On Zerion Prime, 12 billion people looked up at skies filled with ships. The Zephyrian transports were sleek and silver, landing with precision in designated areas. The Kethvar vessels were darker and more angular, but they carried the same precious cargo, hope for survival. "This is Transport Commander Yulseth of the Eternal Dawn," came a transmission from one of the Zephyrian pilots. "We have space for 50,000 refugees, priority to families with children." "Acknowledged," replied Captain Vextar from a Kethvar ship. "We are handling the medical evacuations. Hospitals first, then emergency shelters." Lieutenant Lee Min-ho, still monitoring from his distant station, watched the communications traffic with amazement. The 2 fleets were not just working together, they were working efficiently. Years of military discipline were being turned towards saving lives instead of taking them. "Captain Tae-ho," he reported over the long-range channel, "evacuation is proceeding faster than expected. Both fleets are exceeding their estimated capacity by taking on extra passengers." On the surface of Zerion Prime, something beautiful was happening. Zephyrian soldiers were helping Kethvar medics carry wounded civilians to safety. HFY pilots were sharing fuel with Zephyrian transports that had made extra trips. Old enemies worked side by side, their hands dirty with the same dust, their uniforms stained with the same sweat. Captain Oh Hyunwoo monitored the refugee streams as they flowed toward the transport ships. "Captain, we're seeing something interesting. Mixed groups of civilians are choosing to board both Zephyrian and HFY ships. They're not choosing sides anymore." "Because there are no sides when it comes to survival," Tae-ho replied quietly. "Hours passed. The sun of Zerion Prime moved across the sky as billions of people were lifted from the surface and carried to safety. Admiral Veltar found himself coordinating directly with Commander Thexel, their communications becoming less formal as the work continued. "Thexel, we have overcrowding in Sector 7. Can you spare 3 more transports?" "Already sending them, Veltar. My medical ships are full, but we can make room. These people have suffered enough." Ensign Choi De-eun noticed something that made her heart race with excitement. "Captain, look at the casualty reports from both fleets." Tae-ho examined the data she had found. For the first time in 3 centuries, both the Zephyrian Empire and the HFY Dominion were reporting 0 combat losses. No ships destroyed, no lives lost to enemy fire. Instead, their reports showed only one thing: lives saved. 12 billion refugees successfully evacuated, Lieutenant Park So-jin announced, as the last transport lifted off from Zerion Prime. Both fleets report all civilians accounted for. The empty planet spun silently below them, its cities vacant but intact. No weapons had fired, no one had died. The evacuation that should have been impossible had been completed in record time. "Commander." Thexel was the first to break the strange silence that followed. "Admiral Veltar, this was unexpected." "Indeed," Veltar replied. "I had forgotten what it felt like to save something instead of destroying it." Captain Kim Tae-ho seized the moment. "Commanders, you've just proven something important. When you work together, you can accomplish miracles. When you fight each other, you only create graveyards." "But the war," Thexel began, then stopped. The words sounded hollow after what they had just accomplished. "What war?" asked Lieutenant Lee Min-ho over the communication channel. "You just spent 6 hours saving each other's lives. Your crews worked together like they'd been allies for years. What exactly are you still fighting about?" Admiral Veltar looked around. His bridge had officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for battle. Now they were smiling as they read reports of successful rescues instead of enemy kills. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time to fight for something instead of against something." "The galaxy needs rebuilding," Commander Thexel admitted. "There are hundreds of worlds like Zerion Prime, damaged by our war, filled with people who need help. And you've just proven you can help them," Tae-ho said. "Together." 6 months later, Captain Oh Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of humanity's first diplomatic vessel, watching the reconstruction of Zerion Prime through the viewport. The planet below bustled with activity as Zephyrian and HFY engineers worked, side by side, rebuilding cities and planting new forests. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 3 centuries was over, not because one side had won, but because both sides had chosen to stop fighting. Sometimes the greatest victory was simply knowing when to put down your weapons and pick up your tools. The galaxy was finally at peace, and it had taken the smallest voice to show the largest powers how to find it.